Hi there, I'm Annie from MumLife Australia, and you're listening to the MumLife Australia Podcast, where we combine evidence-based information with practical tips to empower, inspire, and support mums. Today's episode is all about reconnecting to yourself after motherhood. What I love so much about this episode is that it's deep, it's thoughtful, and it's completely authentic. Our expert guest is Amy Taylor-Kabbaz. Amy is many things. She's a writer, a producer, a speaker, a mindful mama coach, and she's mother to 3 young children. Amy is also the author of the new book, Happy Mama, The Guide to Finding Yourself Again. But you know what? More than anything else, Amy is a woman who understands exactly what it's like to lose yourself in motherhood. In this episode, we talk specifically about beating the superwoman complex, tuning into the way we speak to ourselves, building a practice of self-care, children as mirrors of ourselves, and modelling balance and reflection. Plus, Amy shares her tips for re-establishing a strong sense of self beyond motherhood. This episode is all about putting your health, your needs, and yourself first. Welcome to the MumLife Australia podcast, Amy. I'm really excited to be chatting with you today. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. Thank you for asking me to be a part of it.
That's okay. I'm really excited to have you on, actually. There's so much I want to speak to you about, but before we get into that, I actually wanted you to perhaps tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself. So could you tell us a little bit about the journey from motherhood to becoming the happy mama?
It's a big story. It's a big journey. So I'll give you the condensed version as much as I can because my eldest is 8.5 now. So this has really been an 8-year journey for me. Before I became a mum, I was a very ambitious producer for the ABC. I'd gone to university in Tokyo. I had grand plans of being a foreign correspondent. I had all of those things planned out in my life. And like a lot of women my generation, getting married and having babies was, somewhere on the to-do list, but it certainly wasn't my big goal in life. I always wanted to be a mum, but it wasn't something front of mind. And then at about 30, that biological clock started ticking really loudly, and I found myself pregnant, which was fine. I had a lovely pregnancy, and then along came this baby in a quite dramatic and traumatic way in a childbirth, and then the following few months of a very unhappy and unwell baby and a very unhappy and unwell mother, really.
Yeah.
And like so many of us, I found myself completely undone by the experience. The part of me that believed if you studied hard enough, worked hard enough, asked the right questions and followed the rule books, you got ahead in life, was just shocked that motherhood didn't work like that.
Yep.
And I kind of got through those sort of first 4 to 6 months as best I could. And when things started to settle down, I found that I had really changed on so many levels. I kind of didn't know who I was anymore, but I didn't have a chance to stop and think about it. And when I looked around and to see if anyone else was feeling like this, I didn't really feel like anyone else was going through what I was going through. So I threw myself back into work like I've always done, and I just kept going for many years, just climbing that journalism ladder, doing all the things that I thought I should be doing, had a second baby. That rocked my world all over again, but, just kept going, adding more things to my to-do list, thinking that being busy was the answer. Surely if I just kept working hard and doing everything I thought I should do, things would work out okay. Until just over 3 years ago, we had a surprise 3rd pregnancy come along. I was, by that stage, working in Sydney on one of the top-rating breakfast radio programs. So I would wake up at 3:30 every morning, 5 days a week, be at work by 4:15, run around producing live radio and interviews with politicians and all of that very exciting, ego-loving thing with my pregnant belly, and then would come home at lunchtime and write my blog because I was going to be a mummy blogger on the side, and I'd squeeze in a yoga class and I'd pick up my girls, and I think about it now and it's crazy when I think of what I did. Until one day my body went into protest. In fact, I think it was probably my unborn son who said, enough with this crazy life. You need to stop. You need to think about your life better than this. And at 28 weeks pregnant, I went into early labour with him. And it was at that moment when I finally got to the point in my life where I realised that the way that I was doing things wasn't working. And it not only obviously wasn't working for me, but it was putting my baby at a very high risk. Luckily, amazing Western medicine managed to keep him inside. The contractions did stop and I was in hospital for 5 days. But in those 5 days, I was kind of like in a bubble of self-reflection like I have never been before. I think about it now and it was like time stood still for those 5 days. I just really had to ask myself some really big questions. And then that's where this happy mama journey has really started for me. From that moment onwards, I've had to finally answer those questions that started 8 years ago, which is, who am I now that I am a mother of 3? What does this mean for my dreams, my life, my idea of who I am? And how the hell am I going to juggle all of that and not keep getting myself into a situation where I'm run down, exhausted, screaming, sick, whatever it is that shows up when I'm broken? So I hope that's an adequate summary of how this has all come together.
It really is, Amy. I love your story, and to be honest, I didn't really know much about you until I started reading your book. And what I love about your story is it's so relatable. It is so, so relatable. It's relatable to me because I understand that busy life, that, career driven and wanting to succeed and, you work hard and you get what you deserve, if you do the right things and, you get the benefits of that. And so to hear your story, I just find that so relatable. And to be honest, I have to admit, I was really sort of nervous about this conversation when you approached me because I think for me, I've always been a little bit nervous about this discussion we have about wellness and identity and mindfulness and self-care, and not because those topics aren't important. I actually think that they're really crucial, but I think sometimes the problem is that we get so caught up in the things like the practices of meditation and yoga and gratefulness and all of that sort of stuff. And we forget what's really deep down, and the fact that self-care is so much more than that, and mindfulness is much more than that too. And so I was really nervous about whether this conversation was going to be something that people who don't naturally feel spiritual would be able to relate to. But to hear you say that, I think makes me feel as though you really understand what it's like. You understand that, that this superwoman complex that we feel as women, that we need to go out and have the brilliant careers that we worked so hard for, and, we need to come home and have this beautiful house and, a beautiful meal on the table, and you understand those pressures. And I think that's really quite important for our audience, because I think sometimes we feel like these ideals of mindfulness and self-care get a little bit lost, I think. Do you feel like that? Do you find that when you're coaching the mums that come to you that people are quite surprised that this is much deeper than just about the practices of yoga and meditation?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, I am almost the anti strong practices kind of girl when it comes to coaching with that. When I was trained as a coach, which was a big surprise for me that I'd ever do something like that, it kind of all just happened very organically. But I was really anti getting into it because I thought, the last thing I want to be doing is telling an overwhelmed mother who doesn't even have time to wash her hair that she needs to find an hour a day to sit on a yoga mat and drink her green juice and chant Om while she's connecting to her inner divine spirit. That is not what I am about at all. But what I kept finding, though, was that through my work as a journalist, I have had access to some truly amazing people around the world. Like I've been so blessed to interview some of the top mindfulness experts and all of the self-care gurus. And what kept on frustrating me is exactly what you were talking about. All of these amazing people were preaching how to connect to yourself and how to be more mindful and how to have more balance in your life, none of them were mothers with young children. None of their practices are realistic for us. You know, I would love to be able to do the things that they were talking about, but all I kept feeling when I would read their books or interview them or go to their workshops or do all of these different things was I would actually just get more resentful and more bitter about how hard my life was.
Yeah.
So what I've had to do, and what I really hope my book is able to do, is take all of those really big concepts that we're starting to understand that we do need in our lives. Like, you know, I'm sure most of the women listening to you know that if they could look after themselves better, everything would flow better, that they probably do need to prioritise their health a bit better. That if they stopped multitasking so much, maybe they wouldn't be so frazzled. You know, we kind of know this stuff. How the hell we do that in our day-to-day life when we have so many things that we just need to get through each day is so hard. So that's what I really wanted to do, was take all of these big concepts and try and figure out how you can do it when you don't even have time to brush your teeth. Yeah.
As I was reading your book, and I'll say I read your book cover to cover in one sitting, and I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting that at all, and that's exactly what grabbed me. It was so logical, and you don't expect these things to be logical, but the way you've written it is absolutely logical, and I love that. And you ask those really deep questions, and as I was reading what you had written, I thought to myself, wow, this is so much more than that. And I think I resonate very well with something that you said in the book. You talk about how in your blog you were often telling mums or talking about, you know, chakras and meditation, but it wasn't until when you were in that hospital that was the first time you actually sat down and had the time to do it yourself. So, and I think that really showed this whole thing about shoulding, you know, we should meditate, but you get stuck in this cycle of what I should do to feel good about myself. But it's really about finding what makes you feel good, and what makes me feel good might be different to what makes somebody else feel good. And I think that's so important. That message is really clear in your book, and I really love that.
Thank you. Gosh, that is the best feedback. Thank you.
And it's incredibly honest from somebody who was an absolute skeptic. So there you go. So Amy, tell me, what does it mean to you to be a happy mama?
Wow. It took me a whole book to figure that one out, and 8 years. If I could sum it up, it's a woman who has a very strong sense of self that is beyond just being a mother, and every day can connect to that, whether it's just within her mind, whether it is in a meditation, whether it is by going to the gym or starting her business or whatever it is, but to have a sense that she's not putting herself on hold, and there is an acknowledgement of her as a woman. That would be a happy mama to me.
I love that. I really do love that. So how do we do it? How do we go from mums who are crying in cars because they're overwhelmed, screaming at their children because there's just so much going on, and constantly putting themselves last? How do we go from that to either establishing ourselves, our strong sense of self, because we may not have actually ever had that, or re-establishing it after motherhood? What do we need to do to get that identity back? Do you feel like when we give birth as mothers that there is in fact a rebirth? Are we a new person, or is it about getting back the person we used to be?
No, I believe it's a new person. I believe that it is, when you give birth to a new you. In the process of, you give birth to the mother, but I think it's beyond that, because I feel like that, well, let me talk about it in my own experience. So when I explained about that, you know, that sense of achieving an accomplishment and always having to strive, underneath that was a very different person. That was not who I really am. That was a lot of pressure that society, myself, my family, my upbringing, everybody had put on me to be a certain way. So when I look back at that person, that wasn't the real me either. I don't think I've ever really known myself since I was probably about 14, when the world started becoming really overwhelming, and you start doing and saying and being who you think you should be.
Yep.
So I often say that the process of becoming a mother is often the very first time in our lives that we get to press pause on all of that other external pressure we've put on ourselves and connect to something new, connect to who we are as a woman, connect to ourselves in a different way. However, the process of being a mum, which is a newborn, which is so intense and so full on, and then we have a second baby, and then we have to work, and then we have to do all those things, doesn't allow us to actually use that time very well. So I do think we are new, but I think we don't get a chance to figure out who that new person is. So if I was to say, how do we start? I think the very first thing we need to do is acknowledge that we need to ask ourselves some questions, that the time is now to figure out who we are. I don't know about you, but there is no way in the world I want to wake up in 15 years' time when my kids are leaving home and think to myself, oh my God, what am I going to do now? I don't want to lose myself. I don't want to put myself on hold. I want this to be a full life every single day with my children and without them. So we have to acknowledge that by saying, right, I am worth it. It is time for me to figure myself out as well as raise my kids. And then we start with our thoughts. Now, you've read my book, so you know all what I'm going to say, but really the very first thing I always think we need to do is start getting to know ourselves a bit better and tuning into the way that we speak to ourselves, how hard we are on ourselves, how much we're beating ourselves up, perhaps how much we're saying to ourselves, I don't want to do this anymore, I hate this is so hard, what happened to my life, anything that's underlying there. It's about starting to get really clear on how you're treating yourself and how you're talking to yourself.
One of the first exercises in your book is about thinking about the things that you're good at.
Yes.
And I loved that as an example, that there are even at your very, very darkest, there are still going to be things that you are good at. And they don't have to be things that are changing the world or anything big, but just the smallest things that you can be good at. And recognizing those things gives you that feeling of self-worth. It makes you feel really good. And you're right, it does banish those thoughts of what you refer to as mean mama, that voice in our heads that you refer to as, I can't do this, this is too hard, why me, why am I the one that's sacrificing everything? By thinking about those things, you realize, well, wait a second, I do have some self-worth. And if I work on that a little bit, those small things that I'm good at now, or that I recognize that I'm good at now, maybe when I do this again in a month or 2 months or 3 months' time, I'll be able to recognize so much more. And I really like that. That's so comforting to do that exercise.
And also I think, don't you think that there is such an undervaluing of what we're doing as mothers?
Absolutely.
And, I do believe it's changing. I really hope that by the time my daughters are mothers, it's going to be even different again. I know that we have the Instagram feeds and we have the sayings about how motherhood's the most important job in the world, but the reality of our lives is we often don't feel like that. That I have the most amazing and inspiring women in my programs who floor me with what they do every day. Mm-hmm. Like 3 children under 5 with a husband that works away for 6 weeks at a time and only comes home for 1 week with no parents to help, and they just get through.
Yeah.
Women with twins who neither of the babies sleep because they've both got colic, and they still manage to try and do something for themselves every day. But you know what? If I ask them, what do you think you're good at, or do you think you're doing a good job? Most of them say no.
We're so hard on ourselves. We're just so hard on ourselves.
And I say to them, if you could see what I see, it almost makes me teary. You would have no idea how inspired I am by what you're doing right now. But internally in that woman's mind, and look, in my own mind at times as well, we don't see what we're doing is so great. So I feel like we need to give ourselves a little celebration party every night for what we do every day as women.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I feel really strongly about supporting other mums, and I feel like we have this bond of motherhood. We have this obligation to help others. If you know a mum that's struggling, lift them up, because we all know that when you're at those depths of despair, you can't lift yourself up. And sometimes the kind words of even a stranger can be the thing that really, really helps you survive that day. And that's so important.
I agree. And I really feel like we have an opportunity at the moment with social media, with work like you do, with the amazing connection we can have with each other, to really create a sisterhood. I know that that's a really thrown around word and some people might cringe at that word, but to create that sense of sisterhood together, of doing this together. I mean, I know you talk about on your website, this does take a tribe. We need to build each other up. And I'm the same. My first experience of that first baby was so overwhelming that I think it's drawn me to do all of this work over the last 8 years. If I can get into one woman's ears when she is feeling as overwhelmed as I did and say to her, you're amazing, you're doing a great job, it's going to get better, and this is actually going to be the making of you. You're going to look back one day and be so amazed at how strong you are. So start telling yourself that now. If I can do that, my life is complete.
That's inspiring. So how do we, I just think of all these mums, and I've posed this question so many times to the MumLife Australia community, how do we take these women who are feeling overwhelmed and who are putting themselves last, and they know they're putting themselves last, they know this, they know they need to invest more in self-care. How do you go from there to seeking help? Whether that might be, taking the leap and saying, enough is enough. I need an hour out of my day every day to do something that's meaningful to me. Or speaking to somebody who might be able to put those actions in place. How do you go from that? How do you go from recognizing that this is a problem in your life to actually making it a priority? That's the hardest step. You might realize that this is a problem, but until it becomes a priority in your life, do you wait to break? Is that what we're all waiting for? How do we get from one end to the other?
I hope not. I hope we don't have to wait until we break. But I do feel like I totally agree with what you say. So many of us know that we're there in that place that we're about to break, but we don't know how to change it. And I have to be really honest and say, I feel like when you're in that state, when you're in that place, in that, let's say, dark place, in that tough place, you're not going to do it for yourself. Let's be honest here. You don't value yourself enough. You don't think that you can't see any opportunities. You are at the bottom of the pile, and that is you're just in survival mode. You're just getting through each day. So to tell you that you need to find an hour a day is not going to work. What I find with women does work is point out to them how much their family will benefit if you are happier. You will not yell at your kids if your cup is full. I can 100% guarantee that. If you feel like you're just not coping with the day-to-day realities of juggling children and drop-offs and cooking and working and whatever it is that you're juggling, do it for them first. In the end, you won't be doing it for them, you'll be doing it for yourself. But sometimes I think we have to do it for our children because we are still putting them first. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like me on that hospital bed. I think if someone had said it to me, just you need to stop working like this because your health is not okay, I'm not sure whether I would have listened. The thing that got me to finally stop is that pediatrician, that neonatal pediatrician standing in front of me talking about how bad this was because my baby was so small and that if he was born, it was going to be a really bad thing. So I think if you're in that place where you can't figure out how to prioritize yourself, just sit for a moment and think about how you could show up so much better in your family and in your life when you just had a little bit left over for yourself. Maybe that would be the turning point.
I've spoken about it many times before, and I think I've shared this quote as well with the community, is that taking care of yourself is part of taking care of your family. In fact, you can't take care of anyone until you've filled up your own cup. And I love these women who've made these changes, and they say, now I make myself breakfast before I make everybody else's breakfast, or I might make myself that cup of coffee before I've done anything for anybody else. And I feel like making those very, very small changes, just those tiny little adjustments, the small incremental change, and you look back and you think, wow, those small incremental changes can eventually become bigger and bigger and bigger. And for Mother's Day, I set a challenge out for the community saying that, you don't have to make these big, ambitious, I should spend an hour at the gym, or I should do this, or, it would make me happy if I went out for 2 hours with girlfriends for lunch. Think about the small things that make you happy, and that's what I feel really strongly about. As mums, sometimes we don't have the time, but if a cup of coffee makes you happy, take that 5 minutes and enjoy it while it's hot. Or if reading a book is what makes you happy and you've got 10 minutes on the couch, don't fluff about, enjoy that time. And I think that's really important because, like you say, the time we have is so precious.
But also what you're talking about is actually mindfulness. So you know how you said at the beginning that, these concepts, these words of mindfulness, meditation, spiritual connection, all of those kind of woo-woo terms are a bit scary and a bit unknown and a bit overwhelming. That's all that mindfulness is just being in the moment to say, actually, I'm going to sip this cup of coffee and I'm going to taste it. I'm going to feel it move down the back of my throat and into my belly, and I'm going to feel it filling me up and nourishing me, and I'm actually going to take a couple of deep breaths. Oh, my God, that feels better. And you wouldn't believe how much that changes. In my Reconnect program, which is the program I run through my website, we do a 3-minute meditation. That is it. It's a 3-minute meditation, building up to doing that 3 times a day. It is so amazing how hard 3 minutes, 3 times a day, mothers find to do this. You would think that within 24 hours we could find 9 minutes to listen and stop and breathe, and it is really hard. But when we do that, it just allows that little space in the middle of the day or just before bed where we go, okay, right, connect to my breath, calm my thoughts, I'm doing a great job, all of those things. That's all we need. It's just those little pockets, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, the step that I love in all of this mindfulness, and I love that you use the word woo-woo because that's how I refer to all this stuff. Oh, it's so woo-woo. It's just fluff. The step that I love in all of this is that final step of being grateful. You have that cup of coffee and then you're grateful for that cup of coffee. And I was reading about a study recently which showed that thinking about 3 good things that have happened to you in your day and doing that for 6 months has as good of an effect on people as taking Prozac, which is obviously to help people with their depression and anxiety. And I think that's amazing that something as simple as just being grateful. If you can just find 3 of the most basic things to be grateful for, and I know some days that's so hard, but that makes all the difference. It makes all the difference, and it is woo-woo, but it is one of the things that I'm finding that really does help,
And the thing is, it's actually now, it used to be really woo-woo, but now it's been backed up by science. I mean, we've got major corporations around the world, Google, Westpac Bank, like Macquarie Bank, all of these amazing companies that are all about the bottom line, actually training their executives in mindfulness and meditation. Why? Because it's now proven how beneficial it is to every part of our brain and our body. But what I love about that gratitude practice is that they've discovered that there's a part of the brain that's sole function is to get evidence to prove you right. Meaning, if all you do all day is beat yourself up and say, I'm always late, things never go right for me, all I am is the slave, all I ever do is clean up, then there is actually a physical part of your brain that is looking for evidence to prove that you're right. So that's the part of the brain that goes, see, there it is, see, there it is. So your brain is searching out for evidence for that. So if we can start training our brain by doing our gratitude practice every day, by showing it there's things to look for that are great, guess what that part of the brain does during the day? It starts looking for things to be grateful for. It's actually a proven neurological process. So yes, it's woo-woo, but it's actually proven now that it does. You do start looking for better things. You do start feeling like your life is better. You see the cup half full. You have all of those more moments of gratitude and bliss and all of that lovely stuff. So it really works.
It's fascinating, isn't it, that our minds are so powerful. They're so powerful, and that they can work for us or against us, and it really is about finding those tools that are going to help us get through those days.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that you say it's tools, because it is a learnt process. You know, this is like a muscle. You don't go to the gym, get a personal trainer, get to the point where you're feeling really good and healthy and you're happy with the way your body looks, and then say to the personal trainer, great, thanks, see you later, I won't come back. This is something we have to work on every day. It's the same with our mental health and our mindset and focusing on the positive and being kind to ourselves. We're going to have to work on it every day for the rest of our life. This is just the way it is for us to be healthy and happy. And that took me ages to figure out. I thought that there was a nirvana that I would get to. You know, if I sorted my out enough and got on the meditation mat and did, you know, had my crystals or whatever it was, and that's it. I would never have a bad day again, and I'd never yell at my kids, and I'd always be this happy mama. It's not like that. I have to work on it every single day, and I'm okay with that now. But it took me a while to be okay with that.
I wrote this down, actually. You refer to it in many different chapters of your book as building a practice of self-care. And I love that. It's building a practice of self-care. It doesn't just come. Oh. And you see these people who preach these concepts of self-care and wellness. We see them a lot now on social media, on Instagram, and, you know, you think, oh, it's a lifestyle. And perhaps it is a lifestyle, but for people who are so stuck and entrenched in living in the masculine, myself, for example, I've always had a job that's very entrenched in that masculine role, and a lot of women in our community are working in careers that are very masculine. And, you know, this masculine mindset, it's very hard when you're so entrenched in that to think that self-care can actually be part of that you can have a little bit of both, and there is the ability to find that balance.
Oh, absolutely. Our whole society is built on the masculine energy, the masculine way of doing things, which is that real competition, that there's a lack out there, that you have to work hard. It's that addiction to busyness that we're seeing across all areas of modern life. But this is the beautiful opportunity of motherhood, is that if we allow it, it's the first time we can start connecting to the feminine way of doing things. And I don't mean feminine as in, you know, once again, the woo-woo idea. I just mean a softer, more nurturing, more going with the flow, realizing that there is enough for everybody, that it doesn't have to be so hard, that you can have a balance, that you can be okay with going a little bit slower, or saying, I'm taking the afternoon off and I'm going to sit in the park and I'm not going to feel bad about it, or saying, you know, I'm taking the afternoon off and I'm going off by myself. Whatever it is, it's just a bit more of a softer, more accepting way of doing things.
Accepting. I like that.
Yeah. And that really starts with, once again, that way that we're speaking to ourselves. So I know for me, I've got that very masculine drive as well. And if I'm not doing, I feel guilty. If I'm not busy, if I'm not planning the next thing, if I'm not writing an email, if I'm not, you know, creating, then there's a part of me, a very strong part of me, that's always felt like I was not being successful. And I've really had to try and be okay with going at a different pace once you become a mum. The fact is that we can't do it all right now. I don't believe we can. And if we try and do it all, we end up either making ourselves sick or disconnecting from our families and having those breakdowns that we talked about.
You know, it's funny that you talk about, just then you were talking about that addiction to busyness, and as you were talking about that, it actually made me think of a conversation I had a couple of weeks ago with a teacher that's working with my 2-year-old daughter Delilah at a kinder program. And Delilah's very spirited. She's just very busy and always just on the go and very just involved. And her teacher said, you know, she's just it's like her brain is just looking for the next thing, you know. She's not looking at this activity. She's thinking, okay, I've done this activity. What can I do next? What can I do next? And as you talked about that addiction to busyness, I thought, okay, yes, that's me. And I thought, oh my God, my daughter's like that too. Our children can sense that vibe, and they obviously, I mean, a lot of what they do is they mirror us. They mirror our body language. They mirror what we do in terms of physically. So they're mirroring us constantly. And then as you talk about this addiction to busyness, I think, wow, you know what? My daughter is catching up on that. It's almost like she can sense that constant busyness. You know, you said turn it back to your children and your family. And I think, I want her to know that it's okay to slow down. And so perhaps I need to do that in my life. Maybe I need to show her that it's okay to reflect and be still and just enjoy. Because in our lives, I know personally in my life, we're just on the go all the time because that's just how we are. But it's interesting because I wonder how much of that is rubbing off on our children.
Well, I think I'm a firm believer that our children are mirrors back to us of the things we most need to learn.
Mm.
The things that I most need to learn are the things I see showing up in my children, whether it's because they're copying my behaviour or whether it's just a way for the universe to smile down at you and say, see, I don't know. I think probably a bit of both. I do believe it's all divinely orchestrated and we get the children and the parents that we're meant to, but they are, you know, we hear it all the time, they are our greatest teachers. But what I mean by that is not only that they're the greatest teachers about how to be patient and how to juggle things and how to love beyond anything we've ever thought that we could love, but they're also our greatest teachers because we see in them what we most need to learn. So with the addiction to busyness, with the short tempers, with the inability to focus on one thing at a time, or whatever it is that you're seeing showing up in your child that's kind of pushing your buttons or making you worried. Or I know with my girls now, they're a bit older, watching them form friends and me worrying about how their friendship circle and their social circle and will they be accepted and is that the right friend? All of that is a mirror back on me and all the worries I had as I was growing up with my friendships. It's all an opportunity for us to heal, change the pattern and do it differently so the next generation don't make the same mistakes we have.
And that's the starting point, isn't it? When you realise that. And mums, we want something better for our children than we had ourselves.
Absolutely, completely. And I believe that the world is changing so quickly and our children are so sensitive to that we have to model balance. We have to model mindfulness. We have to show them that you don't have to be attached to your phones and your computers and this idea of success and busyness. We have to show them the balance, the yin and the yang, that real need for quiet time and reflection and nature and getting out into Mother Earth and all of that stuff, because otherwise we're going to be really overwhelmed by the world that we're going to throw at them.
I think you're spot on. I hope this helps enlighten the other mums who are feeling overwhelmed by all of this. I read your book, and as I read it, it just really resonated with me. So I hope that this discussion is a bit of a glimpse into that. And for those mums that are struggling and just want to make a change in their lives, I hope that this discussion brings to light the fact that it doesn't have to be something that's difficult. It doesn't have to be something that's not you. It's just about making that change and accepting that you want that change in your life and that you do want to put yourself first. And what you said about reestablishing your strong sense of self. It's really just about making that change in our lives. Thank you so much, Amy, for your discussion. I really appreciate it. I'd love to know, Amy, where can mums go to get help? What do you do as a coach? Because I think I myself, when I was struggling deeply with this, I had no idea that there was people like you around. I perhaps might have stumbled across your book if it had existed back then, but I certainly didn't know that what you do exists. So can you just tell us very briefly about what you do as a coach and how that may actually help mums that are trying to take the next step?
Absolutely. I know. I wish I had people like me 8 years ago as well. I went looking and there wasn't. But So basically, my website is happymama.com.au, and on there, if anybody's listening, please jump on and sign up. There's a free link there. You can get the very first thing you can try is that there's a meditation that you can download for free. And this is not a woo-woo meditation. We don't talk about goddesses and chakras and anything like that. It is literally an opportunity to let your body and your mind and your breath calm down before you fall asleep. So I call it the end of day meditation, and it's just your way of taking 10 minutes before you fall asleep to calm that crazy, busy, monkey mind busyness and just start to let your body relax so you can have a better sleep, even if you're going to be woken up 2 hours later by a baby. So that's the first thing that I'd love everyone to find if they are feeling overwhelmed. And then the other things, I work one-on-one with some women and we work through different areas of their life, really trying to help them find that sense of self again, maybe bring in some practices each day that make them feel less overwhelmed. But the thing I really love to do is I run a program 3 times a year called the Reconnect program, which is a 40-day program based on the idea in yoga and a lot of neuroscience that it takes 40 days to create a new pathway in your brain. And for those 40 days, we work through the book. We start with kindness. We do that 3-minute meditation each day. We look at how you feel about yourself, how you value yourself, who you want to be, what you want to let go in your life, how you can start finding little pockets for yourself. It's really practical. I promise there's no 1-hour meditation practices. There's nothing outrageous. It is for busy mums. And there's been over 250 women go through that now. And it just amazes me how these little practices of something like 3 minutes a day totally changes these women's lives in 40 days. So that's really what I love to do, is that program.
I was listening to a video that you did with one of the women that you had coached, and she talked about getting her shine back.
Yes.
And I just thought, wow, isn't that what we all want? We want our shine back.
She just summed it up so beautifully, didn't she? That we just feel like we're just not that person we used to be. We're just not shining. Where did I go? It's that real sense of, as the tagline of the book it is, that finding yourself again. And the only way we can do that is by starting to focus on ourselves. It's as simple as that. Rather than focusing on everybody else, just saying every day, hang on a second, but what about me?
That's right. What about me?
What
Love
about
it.
me?
Thank you so much, Amy. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to our listeners and to be part of our community. And I'm just absolutely thrilled that you reached out and that we've been able to share this message. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you. I absolutely loved it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 3 of the MumLife Australia podcast. If you can relate to having lost yourself in motherhood, or you're just sick of always being the last priority in your own life, then please take this opportunity to reassess and start making that first change in your life. You can find extra resources relating to today's podcast on the show notes at www.mumlifeaustralia.com. And don't forget to join the MumLife Australia community on Facebook, where you can have your parenting questions answered by our tribe of experts and our podcast guests. I want to leave you today with a quote from Amy. We did not fight this hard for the life we long for, to become so disconnected from ourselves in the process of getting it.